Hi there, everyone. It's Russell. Welcome to the Reading Fabricator. Hope you're doing well. And in my continuation of using my newfound best friend, this Kindle here, I'm actually really enjoying this thing. It's very convenient. I decided to read another J.G. Ballard book, Empire of the Sun, sort of a war fiction book with glimpses of autobiographical elements based on Ballard's time living in Shanghai as a kid. And Ballard has yet to let me down. He really, really hasn't let me down based on on the now four books that I've read by him, covering all sorts of different genres. I mean, this one here, again, semi-autobiographical war fiction. Then you've got the sort of the Kafka-esque Concrete Island, which I'm a fan of as well, although it's probably my least favorite of the four. Then you've got the controversial Crash, and then probably my favorite one, which is the dystopian High Rise. So I mean, he keeps on giving. He's a damn fine writer, and I keep meaning to just keep on reading stuff by him. I've become entranced with his writing style. Empire of the Sun is a different beast altogether. It's so different from everything he's written. Whereas the other books, I was able to really speed through. This one actually took me quite a long time. I had to read it in sort of short bursts over the course of about a week or two. And there is a lot more empathy to be found in this book compared to those previous ones there. And you can definitely tell that it had an impact on him compared to writing the other ones. But it's a very almost, it has like an adventure sense to it as well, depicting the character of Jim living in Shanghai with his parents during the pre-war years, and then subsequently the attack on Pearl Harbor, which led to the Japanese invading Shanghai, and him being separated from his parents and interned at a POW camp, the Langhua prisoner of war camp, and then subsequently his time spent there and a brief period afterwards as well. So it covers quite a long period of time. I'd say about 3, maybe 4 years in his life. And even though the whole book is quite a good read, I did find elements of it to be lacking. The book is sort of divided into sort of 3 sections. I mean, you've got the pre-invasion of Shanghai, then you've got the POW section, and then everything that happens after that. And I did find bits and pieces to be better articulated than other sections, or kept my interest a lot more than certain sections. There were parts where I had only read like 10 pages a day because I just wasn't that interested. But then there were other sections where I read like 60 pages a day because I just wanted to keep on seeing what was going on. And everything that happens in the first 100 pages is probably my favorite part of the book. In particular, when Jim talks about how he can just cycle around all the streets of Shanghai without a care in the world. How he goes to these parties with his parents, these sort of these high-class parties. He's in basically the high society. And some people are listening to the radio, which are talking about the war that's going on in Europe at the time. This is before Japan began their invasion. And they're going on and on and on about, well, will the war hit us? Will we be going to war? So there's an imminent sense of destruction that's coming this way. You get a hint of it at the very preset of this book. But most importantly, I mean, this novel is about a kid who absolutely just loves planes. That is the main theme that's going on here. He adores piloting. He adores all the different types of aircrafts that are out there. And I've learned a few about aircraft just from reading this thing. But when the war finally does hit, it is a gloriously written section. It is my favorite part in the whole book. It is just extensively thrilling. It is one of the most thrilling passages I have read in a long time. He sees it out the window where he's staying, just the warship just coming down, I think the Yangtze River, and just bombarding the American ship. And his mother comes in and his father comes in, and they're racing to get down to the streets. And by the time they get down to the streets, it's too late. Chaos has ensued. There are civilians running everywhere. There are soldiers running everywhere. The Japanese tanks have come in. Just all this chaos. And in that chaos, he gets separated from them. And what follows there is the days and weeks in which he's basically living on the streets of Shanghai, which has now become occupied by the Japanese, going to various mansions of people that he used to know and just hanging out there eating their food, until basically on the brink of starvation, he surrenders himself to the Japanese and goes to the POW camp, Langhua, which for the next 3 years he spends there. And in those 3 years, he sort of details the monotony of life that happens there, just all the routines that you get into. And the characters that you meet there, including the Vincent family and Dr. Ransom, and I think his name's Basie or Bazzie. He's this American soldier who he forms quite an attachment to and keeps on popping in and out of the book quite a lot. And this to me is where the book sort of slowed down a little bit. It sort of just went at its own pace. So as I said before, that section there where the initial invasion happened is chef kiss a magnificent. It is just thrilling. I was immersed in it immediately. And everything that happens at the Langwa camp, while it's still interesting quite a lot, I just wasn't as immersed in it as that. And there's still glimpses of the horrors of war that go on in this camp. You get hints at it, but it's sort of told through this kid's naive sensibilities. He's not quite sure what's going on, but he still has this feeling of empathy towards the Japanese. He still has some respect towards them as well, and he tries to find the good in everything. And I guess that's the meaning of being a kid, is trying to see the good in everything. Compared to the adults who are in the camp and how they see the situation. There's a lot of talks about food shortages, about some of the high class people putting on plays to please the masses. He keeps on learning Latin and learning new words, so he keeps his schooling going. And this whole internment at the POW camp goes on for about 3 years. And in that time, you also have the American planes that are coming in and bombarding the Japanese runways, trying to take them down. And there's an absolutely magnificent section in this part as well, where the American planes come through the camp. They're bombing the camp, and Jim gets up on top of the scaffolds, on top of the roof. He's just standing there, just shouting at them, and the planes are going right past him. Magnificent moment. There's little moments peppered throughout this book, including the previous one I mentioned on the initial invasion, which it's like little bits of juice that just really get you reinvigorated into the story. It really keeps you going. And as I said before, J.G. Ballard is an author who has yet to let me down. I mean, each book of his provides a different aspect of life and of writing styles and of genre that he's a very eclectic writer. He seems to be able to dip his toes into everything. And I've also got another book by him called The Drowned World, which is a sci-fi book. So that's another one to get into, just to see how he went with that one. He was a very prolific author. He wrote a shitload of books. And judging by reading Empire of the Sun, it just makes me want to go out and read more by him. Another great moment is when they're leaving the Langwa POW camp and going on what is referred to as a death march. I mean, there are people that are just collapsing to the ground, starvation and dying. He witnesses the bombing of Nagasaki, not the actual bomb itself, but the flash of light that just completely obliterates the sky. He's just seeing it and just wondering what it is, like God just showing up in the sky. And even the Japanese soldiers are looking at it with awe as well. They're not quite sure what to make of it. And it's a really fascinating, almost biblical way of writing that Ballard presents to you, this bombing of Nagasaki, which eventually leads to the end of the war and shows Jim's adventures, basically, in this post-war, almost like apocalyptic and not quite lawful, almost like a lawless surrounding. There's all this chaos that's going on. People just don't know what to make of Shanghai anymore. People don't know how to live their life. There's no laws going on in this country, and you could see all the Americans that are dropping food reserves onto the ground, and that's how Jim survives for the rest of the book. And through what I've just told you, you sort of get this almost like an adventure of a lifetime for this young boy who I think was 11 or so when the book started and was 14 by the time the book ends. But it details his life during this war setting and how war is perceived through the eyes of a young child. And again, there's a lot of naivete to it and ignorance. But you just go along with it and you see how it is perceived through the eyes of someone who doesn't quite understand what's going on, someone who just wants to see the good in everything. And I think that's a wonderful way to approach things as well. And this was a wonderful book, and I'm really glad I read it. And there are certain sections in the book which, from a writing standpoint, are, as I said before, chef kiss beautiful. There's a lot of talks of how in a war, just no one knows what side they're on, no one knows what's going to happen, and that's all that sort of thing. Real war, no one knew which side he was on, and there were no flags or commentators or winners. In a real war, there were no enemies. There's another great section where they find just a row of dead Chinese soldiers in the trenches, This is about a paragraph long. In the trenches between the burial mounds, hundreds of dead soldiers sat side by side with their heads against the torn earth, as if they had fallen asleep together in a deep dream of war. So there's just these wonderful little sentences that detail Ballard's excellence at writing. He's a real master of the craft. There's another great moment. This is before the war kicks off for them, where he's playing through the fields and he finds this downed Japanese plane, and he envisions the dead soldier that's in it. It's quite a beautifully written section. After dinner, as Jim lay in his bedroom on the 10th floor of the Palace Hotel, he tried not to sleep. He listened to the drone of the Japanese seaplane landing on the river at the Nantou Naval Air Base. He thought of the crashed fighter at Hangzhou Aerodrome and of the Japanese pilot whose seat he had filled that afternoon. Perhaps the spirit of the dead aviator had entered him, and the Japanese would join the war on the same side as the British. Jim dreamed of the coming war, of a newsreel in which he stood in his flying suit on a decks of a silent carrier, ready to take his place with those lonely men from the island nation in the China Sea, borne with them across the Pacific by the spirit of the divine wind. That's probably my favorite section in the whole book. I really love these passages, which almost have like a spiritual, biblical sense to them. For some reason, I adhere to them. They're just absolutely amazing. Trying to keep up with his spirits, Jim decided to visit the homes of his closest friends, Patrick Maxted and Raymond twins. After washing himself in the soda water, he went into the garden to fetch his bicycle. During the night, the swimming pool had drained itself. Jim had never seen the tank empty, and he gazed with interest at the inclined floor. The once mysterious world of wavering blue lines, glimpsed through a cascade of bubbles, now lay exposed to the morning light. The tiles were slippery with leaves and dirt, and the chromium ladder at the deep end, which had once vanished into a watery abyss, ended abruptly beside a pair of scrummy rubber slippers. That's actually the good thing about this Kindle here. I mean, even though I personally prefer the physical books, I'm able to take like notes on this thing and just instantly click on it. So I'm actually growing quite fond of this. And as I said before, the books are cheaper on this. So I'm not totally cancelling our books altogether. It's just that this is so much convenient. So much more convenient, and reading Empire of the Sun, I found myself to be a quicker reader on a Kindle than in the paperback version. But the book itself, I mean, from a war standpoint, I've always been drawn to war books and autobiographical books about the war. So Empire of the Sun was a no-brainer for me. I really, really did like it, and I highly recommend it. It's a truly fascinating way to see the war through the eyes of a younger person. And even though he has this glimmer of hope in him, that he sees the good in everything, there are passages where you can see it breaking him down, that he's unable to cope anymore, and he wishes death upon him. There's a really brutal section after the death march from the camp, where one of his closest friends dies, and he just wishes death upon him. He feels like he can no longer keep going, but something just keeps him going. He wants to live. He wants to find hope and the good in everything. So you can relate to this kid quite a lot. He's a very adventurous kid. He's just, yeah, you really come to like him as a character, and even with the experiences that Ballard had in Shanghai when he was a kid. You can see the autobiographical elements that are popping in this book. You can really connect the two. And those to me were the strongest elements of the book, was seeing the autobiographical elements in it. And in the end, I highly recommend this book. I think you'll really like it. It kept me immersed, and even though I said before there were parts where it dipped for me in quality, there was always something to bring it back up for me. And I'll end on this quote here from the book, which I think is actually quite a damn fine piece of writing. After a few minutes, he was forced to admit that he could recognize none of the constellations. Like everything else since the war, the sky was in a state of change. For all their movement, the Japanese aircraft were its only fixed points, a second zodiac above the broken land. A book about war, a book about a child, a book about aircrafts. If that's your thing, give it a go, because I think you'll like it. Thank you very much, and see you on the next one. Bye.